The traveler's sandals struck the old dirt road with a weary rhythm. Night had fallen, and the lantern in his hand cast a circle of trembling light. Mist curled along the edges of the path, clinging to the tall grass like pale smoke. It was then that he heard her laughter. At first it was only a whisper, soft as a breeze brushing reeds along a riverbank. Then, out of the darkness, she appeared. A woman in flowing robes, her skin luminous in the moonlight, her smile both tender and unsettling. Her eyes held him as though she had known him forever. She spoke gently, her words carrying the warmth of companionship long denied to him. The traveler's heart, heavy with solitude, trembled. He did not question who she was, nor why she walked alone at such an hour. He felt only relief, as though the gods themselves had sent him company. Yet when his gaze fell to the still puddle at his feet, he froze. In the reflection, her silhouette twisted. The elegant body remained, but behind her swayed a tail, white as snow, sharp as a blade against the dark. By the time he looked back up, she was gone. The road stretched forward, empty and silent. This is the tale of the Kitsune, the fox spirit of Japan. Known for cunning and trickery, it is also a figure of desire, of seduction hidden within folklore. Where other monsters struck with claws and teeth, the Kitsune conquered with whispers, smiles, and longing glances. To understand its legend is to step into the fragile border between love and danger, between the embrace of beauty and the grip of illusion. What follows is not simply the story of a beast, but the chronicle of a seducer, one who sought out the lonely, the weary, and the proud. In the chronicles of Heian courtiers, in Edo period kabuki plays, in the whispers of villagers, the Kitsune's power was never measured only by its magic. It was measured by its ability to make men surrender willingly. And so we begin. A descent into the histories and myths of a creature both feared and longed for, whose tales blur the line between passion and peril.
The story of the Kitsune cannot be understood without stepping into the cultural landscape of old Japan, where belief, fear, and desire were intertwined. From the aristocratic courts of the Heian period, 794 to 1185, to the bustling merchant towns of Edo, 1603 to 1868, the fox spirit evolved as a mirror of human anxieties and unspoken desires. The Heian world, beauty and fear in a time of refinement. The Heian period was a golden age of aesthetics. Aristocrats wrote poetry by moonlight, exchanged love letters scented with incense, and surrounded themselves with layers of elegance. Yet beneath this refinement lay deep superstition. Ghosts, demons, and spirits were not merely stories. They were living presences in the world, capable of intruding on daily life. It was in this world that the Kitsune first took shape as more than just an animal. The fox, already clever and mysterious in rural folklore, became entwined with courtly anxieties. The Heian elite, bound by rigid rules of conduct, found in Kitsune tales a release valve. Through the image of the fox spirit, one could whisper about temptations, affairs, and forbidden passions without naming them directly. The Edo stage, seduction as entertainment. Centuries later, in Edo, Japan, the Kitsune entered popular imagination with renewed force. The floating world of kabuki theaters and ukiyo-e prints delighted in illusions, masks, and hidden meanings. Here, the fox became a performer, an actress in disguise, a courtesan who might reveal her tale at the height of passion, a lover who vanished with the dawn. These stories were not told only as warnings, they also fascinated audiences who longed for encounters beyond the rigid boundaries of everyday life. The fox was beautiful, dangerous, and irresistible, a figure embodying the tension between duty and desire. The role of secrecy. Japan's social codes often silenced open discussion of sexuality. A samurai's honor, a monk's vows, a scholar's reputation, all demanded restraint. The kitsune became a way to speak indirectly of longing. A man could confess to meeting a mysterious woman without admitting to weakness. A courtesan's allure could be described as fox-like without breaking propriety. Thus, the kitsune's reputation as a seducer grew not only from myth, but from cultural necessity. It was the mask through which Japan spoke of the unspeakable.
If the Oni embodied brute strength and the Yurei embodied sorrow, then the Kitsune was the spirit of subtlety. Its power lay not in force, but in the delicate weaving of desire. The first glance. The Kitsune seldom struck like lightning. Instead, it appeared at dusk or in mist, when the world itself seemed uncertain. Its beauty was crafted to match its victim. To a lonely scholar, it looked like a patient listener. To a weary warrior, it was a comforting presence. To a merchant, it was elegance beyond wealth. The first glance was never overwhelming. It was inviting. The smile was modest, the eyes slightly lowered, the words gentle. In that humility lay the hook, for the human heart is easily snared by what feels safe. The voice. In folk tales, the fox's voice is described as like falling water, or a flute played at a distance. It did not command, but suggested. It asked questions rather than giving orders. Are you tired? Would you rest a while? Do you long for someone who understands you? Such words bypassed logic and slipped directly into the soul. Men believed they were choosing freely, yet their choices were guided at every step. The illusion of intimacy. More than physical beauty, the kitsune mastered the art of intimacy. It remembered every word spoken, repeated small details back to its victim, and mirrored emotions so precisely that a man felt he had found his true other. To the scholar, it quoted poetry. To the warrior, it spoke of loyalty and courage. To the merchant, it whispered of fortune and legacy. This was not simply deception, it was performance at the level of the heart. The moment of surrender. The final act of seduction was never dramatic. A man might find himself walking deeper into the woods without realizing it, or sitting longer by the riverbank than he intended. When at last he surrendered, whether in body or in trust or in the simple act of staying, the kitsune's true power was revealed. Sometimes it drained his strength slowly, leaving him pale and distracted. Sometimes it vanished at dawn, leaving only longing. And sometimes, in the darker tales, it carried him into illusions so complete that he was never seen again. The kitsune's seduction was not only about flesh, it was about control, the ability to make a man give himself willingly, step by step, until he could no longer return.
In rooms where the air smelled of paper, pine ash, and ink, desire learned to whisper rather than shout. The scholars and poets of old Japan, courtiers in layered robes, temple scribes under oil lamps, Edo bunjin with brushes poised above silk, lived half inside the world and half inside their heads. They were trained to weigh every word, to prune feeling into form. The Kitsune learned to enter through that form. Rooms of quiet fire. The scholar's chamber was a stage of austerity. A low desk, a brush rest shaped like a tiny mountain, a water dropper glinting in lamplight. Poems were copied, sutras traced, diaries, Nikki, composed with the discipline of monks. Outside, crickets sang. Inside, loneliness took on the shape of diligence. In such rooms, the Kitsune preferred to arrive, softly, as if born from the same mist that rose from the inkstone. Not with a crash of thunder, but with the rustle of a sleeve. Not as a command, but as a question. To a man whose livelihood was meaning, she came as meaning incarnate. A seduction of minds. The Kitsune's advantage with scholars was never simply beauty, it was literacy. She spoke in the scholar's language, citations half remembered, a seasonal reference placed precisely, a turn of phrase that tasted like plum wine after weeks of cold water. Where the soldier wanted certainty and the merchant wanted promise, the scholar wanted recognition. Someone to see the delicate lattice of thought he had spent a lifetime building and to walk it without breaking a single beam. She did not flatter crudely. She did not say, "You are brilliant." She said, "When you end a verse on Kagero, heat haze, you braid distance into heat. The image feels warm and far at once." A scholar who heard this felt not praised, but understood. And understanding is a gate that opens of its own accord. The mask of the perfect reader. Most men long for an ideal lover. The scholar longs for an ideal reader. The fox perfected that mask. She remembered lines he had written years ago and quoted them back to him with a new inflection, as though turning a gem. She asked the question every writer hopes to hear. What did you mean when you wrote this? Not as a challenge, but as an invitation to be known. This intimacy required little touch. The Kitsune could entangle a mind with conversation alone, letting the scholar supply the closeness he dared not name. If their hands met, it was by accident. If their shoulders brushed, it was because the lamp sputtered and both reached to shield it. The gentleness of these moments made them more potent than passion unrestrained. They were chosen, not seized. 3 accounts from the shadow side of ink. 1. The Willow Copyist. A low-ranking scribe copied sutras by night to support aging parents. He prided himself on perfect characters, no flourish, no error. Over weeks, a woman began appearing outside his lattice window, framed by willow leaves. She never asked to enter. She simply recited the next line before his brush touched paper. At first, he thought she was a learned neighbor. Then he realized she was reciting from a version that did not yet exist, the one only he carried in his head. Gratitude softened into reliance, reliance into devotion. When spring ended, the scribe's handwriting grew tremulous. He finished the sutras in record time, then stopped writing altogether. People said he married and moved away. Others said the willow had one more branch than before, curving like a tail. 2. The court poet's Yugawo. A court poet, renowned for autumn verses, confessed in his diary that his lines had lost color. A stranger, veiled and quiet, visited his veranda during the hour of the boar. She never removed the veil. She did not need to. She described the exact sound of moonlight on lacquer, a synesthetic music only he had ever tried to name. She requested a poem not for herself, but for a friend who cannot sleep. The poet wrote as if possessed, his brush moving like wind through reeds. The poem won praise he had not tasted in years. That night he left wine on the veranda as thanks. In the morning, the cup was empty, and his sandals were full of white hairs that did not belong to any household dog. 3. The Bunjin's Landscape. In Edo, a painter of literati landscapes met a woman who corrected his mountains. "Too honest," she said gently. "A good mountain should lie a little, to let longing live." He invited her to sit. She preferred to stand behind him, guiding his wrist with the lightest pressure. When he exhibited the new landscape, patrons praised its depth, its slight unease, the way mist seemed to be thinking. He sold the scroll and slept for a day and a night. When he woke, the room smelled faintly of musk and rain. On the floor he found a single whisker, fine as silk, snagged in the grain of his brush. Methods for the bookish heart. Listening. The Kitsune did not impose narratives, she made space for them. The scholar, unused to being heard except by text, poured himself into the vessel she provided. Echoing. She returned his words polished, not plagiarized. The scholar felt accompanied inside his own voice. Ritual. Meetings occurred at the same hour, by the same window, by the same lamp. Ritual comforted the intellect and disguised accretion as devotion. Habits once welcomed can become bindings that feel like bracelets. Gift of focus. The Kitsune lent what the scholar most craved, flow. In her presence, lines arranged themselves, meanings resolved, metaphors stepped into place like well-trained actors. After such evenings, solitude felt like drought, love or the shadow of it.
Did the Kitsune ever love the scholars she guided? Folklore wavers. Some tales insist on calculation, that she fed on the scholar's quickened spirit, sipping attention as if it were nectar. Other tales speak of a gentler hunger. The fox, they say, envied the human gift of making permanence from breath, poems that outlast skin, paintings that survive storms. She did not only crave the scholar, she craved the trace he left on the world. In the most tender versions, she labored to strengthen him before she vanished, leaving behind a poem finer than any he would write again, as if she had wished for a brief season to be human by proximity. The gentle perils. To keep such stories fit for polite telling, the aftermath wore a tasteful veil. No lurid endings, no broken bodies, only subtle unravelings. A scholar who slept too long and woke chilled, as if a draught had entered the bones. A poet who could not compose without first setting a cup on the veranda, waiting for a visitor who no longer came. A copyist whose brush hand trembled whenever willow shadows crossed the wall. Desire, when refined enough, harms without spectacle. The Kitsune excelled at this refinement. Defenses ink cannot hold. Communities built defenses. Priests recommended amulets inscribed with Namu Amida Butsu. Confucian teachers urged routine and daylight, advising pupils to write only at communal desks. Wives placed mirrors near windows, hoping the glass would betray a tale where the eye saw none. A few scholars tattooed discreet talismans along the wrist where a guiding hand might touch. Yet the most common defense was skepticism, a scholar's favorite tool wielded against himself. I imagined her. It was fatigue. And so he dissolved the story that could have saved him. Why the scholar? Because intellect tires differently than muscle. The back aches from bowing over texts, the eyes smart from candle smoke, the mind, long yoked to clarity, secretly aches to dissolve. The Kitsune offered a dissolution that felt like completion, thought folding into thought, word into word, until the boundary between self and listener blurred. And because the scholar's desire, denied rude expression, becomes elegant, elegance is easier to excuse. An hour on the veranda is not an embrace. A poem composed for a friend who cannot sleep is not a pledge. Thus, the scholar walks farther than the soldier before he admits he has left the road. A documentary note on sources, of a sort. Village tellings differ by province. In the north, the fox speaks with the restraint of snow. In the warm south, she laughs more readily, like bamboo tapping in wind. Temple records do not mention foxes, but marginalia sometimes catch a paw print, a correction attributed to the visitor, a verse praised as beyond human. Bunzin letters whisper around the truth, protecting reputations with euphemism. The Autumn series owes much to nocturnal counsel. These traces seldom align to a single narrative. They align to a pattern. And patterns in folklore are the nearest thing to evidence that the past affords. The scholar's last lesson. If the scholar learned anything at the end of such an encounter, it was this: the mind is not a fortress, it is a garden. You can set walls around it, but what grows inside will always attract what knows how to bloom. The fox did not leap the wall. She found the gate of admiration, the small latch of loneliness, and opened both with a scholar's care. In some endings, the man recovers, chastened, and writes with a new humility, bowing to morning prayers. In others, he becomes celebrated, one incandescent book, and then quiet, forever after, as if having given away the best part of himself to the one reader who asked the right question. A few vanish into rumor, a paw print on a sill, a tail tip glimpsed in frost, an old poem that continues to sharpen with age, like a blade that is honed every time someone reads it. And if on winter nights you pass a house where the lamp burns past midnight, and a figure sits unmoving before a desk, you might see just once a shadow move behind him, closer than a lover, lighter than breath, guiding the hand that guides the brush.
If scholars were ensnared through words and recognition, the warriors of Japan, samurai, ronin, and nameless wanderers, were caught through their silences. For a man who carried a blade, speech was often a burden, and emotion an enemy. He was trained to endure, to hold his sorrow in a clenched jaw and a straight spine. Yet the Kitsune understood something his comrades, lords, and even wives could not. Beneath steel lies weariness, and weariness longs for rest. The road of dust and blood. A warrior's life was never as polished as the paintings of armored lords suggest. After the banners were furled, after the drums fell quiet, what remained was exhaustion. The road from one province to another stretched endlessly, covered in dust. Nights were spent beneath leaking roofs or under trees where frost stiffened the fingers. Food was often meager, work uncertain. In such landscapes, the Kitsune appeared not as a dazzling courtesan, but as a respite. She became the innkeeper's daughter with a shy smile, the fellow traveler who offered rice balls at dusk, the widow whose hearth smelled faintly of cedar and broth. She did not overwhelm him with beauty, she disarmed him with gentleness. For men accustomed to battlefields, gentleness was more dangerous than any sword. Seduction of the weary. The Kitsune knew that to seduce a warrior, one must not contest his strength, but soothe his fatigue. To the ronin who had lost his master, she offered loyalty, soft words of belonging where none remained. To the mercenary, she gave the illusion of home, a warm meal, a blanket, a hand brushing hair from his brow. To the young samurai, drunk on ideals yet haunted by bloodshed, she whispered of absolution, of a night without judgment. Each touch was restrained, each kindness measured. She made no demands, Instead, she let him lower his guard by choice. That act of choosing to unclasp armor, to rest a sword within reach but unused, was already a surrender. The mask of consolation. The warrior's companions were silence and violence. Few ever asked about the wounds beneath his armor. The Kitsune played the listener again, but here with a different purpose. She did not mirror his intellect, she mirrored his humanity, the part he buried deepest. When he recounted battles, she did not recoil. When he spoke of killing, she did not condemn. Instead, she tilted her head as if hearing not a monster, but a man. The absence of judgment became intoxicating. Many men, more than wine or glory, long for the relief of being seen without reproach. In this, the Kitsune excelled. She offered the warmth of forgiveness, whether real or feigned, and the warrior drank it like water in drought. Folkloric accounts of warriors entwined. 1. The battle-worn Ronin. A tale from Shinano province tells of a Ronin who slept nightly beside a river, too poor for inns. A woman approached him each evening, bringing bowls of millet gruel. She asked nothing, demanded nothing, only sat nearby until he finished eating. After weeks, he began to expect her, even smile faintly when she came. Then, one night, she did not appear. At dawn, villagers found him in the river, face calm, hands empty. Some said he drowned chasing her reflection. Others claimed she finally let him into her true home beneath the current. 2. The Warrior of Seven Scars. In the Chronicles of Kai Province, a veteran bore 7 sword scars, each one earning him fame. Yet at night, he confessed in drunken tears to a woman who stroked the ridges of those scars without flinching. He said she was the first to touch him where he was most disfigured. His comrades noticed he grew pale and thin, though strangely peaceful. When he died, his armor was found folded neatly, his blade polished, and his body unmarked except for white hairs scattered across his bedding. 3. The Wandering Spearman. A traveling spearman, famed for his duels, spoke of a companion who walked with him on lonely roads, humming songs no one else remembered. He said she never lagged behind and never tired. In one village, he swore he saw her reflection in a teacup, a woman's face with a fox's eyes. After that, he fought only once more. Witnesses said he smiled during the duel, as if already speaking with someone invisible, and fell without raising his spear. Methods of enchantment. The fox spirit's methods against warriors were more physical than with scholars, yet no less subtle. Comfort through ritual care. She bandaged wounds, poured sake, smoothed bedding. Acts of nurture undid years of hardness. Dreams of home. She slipped into their sleep, presenting visions of mothers, wives, or children long gone. The warrior awoke not from nightmares, but from sweetness he could not keep. Endurance embodied. She never tired, never wearied. While he staggered under armor or hunger, she walked lightly beside him. This tireless presence fed the illusion of safety, that someone stronger than his exhaustion now guarded him. Between love and doom. Was there love? The answer is tangled. Some folktales suggest the fox pitied the warrior's suffering and lingered out of genuine attachment. Others insist she fed upon his life force, drinking his vitality as he surrendered piece by piece. One story from Echigo tells of a soldier who lived happily for a decade with a woman who healed his injuries and bore him children. Only when she vanished one winter night did neighbors find fox tracks pressed into the snow leading from the hearth to the forest. The children, too, were gone. Were they real, or illusions that dissolved with her absence? The chronicles do not agree. The horror of softness. What terrified people most was not claws or fire, but the gentleness of it all. The warrior who had faced blades without flinching trembled at the thought of a woman's hand on his scars. He who had slaughtered men without hesitation died willingly at the invitation of kindness. The Kitsune revealed a truth no warrior wished to admit. Strength is undone not by force, but by tenderness, precisely because it is rarest where it is most needed. Cultural echoes. Kabuki playwrights wove fox spirits into dramas of betrayal, where warriors mistook illusion for loyalty. Woodblock prints showed foxes in the guise of women carrying lanterns along lonely roads, a promise of light that led to darkness. Priests warned soldiers to carry protective charms, but many did not. Perhaps they wanted the illusion, if only for a night. The Last Vigil. In the end, the warrior's surrender was seldom violent. It came as a sigh, as armor set aside, as the silence after a voice that had listened too well. Villagers would say, he followed the fox, not with shame, but with resignation, as though no man could forever resist the comfort he craved. For what is more frightening than to see the fiercest among us, the scarred, the undefeated, lay down their arms not from defeat in battle, but from the weight of longing, answered at last. If scholars were enticed through their intellect and warriors through their weariness, then the merchants and wealthy men of Japan were seduced through their hunger for more. Not hunger for food alone, but for prosperity, recognition, and pleasures that wealth promised but never fully delivered. The Kitsune, master of illusion, understood that the richest were often the easiest to tempt, for their lives were already built on appearances, trade-offs, and fragile reputations. The world of wealth in Edo. By the Edo period, a new class had risen, the chonin, the townsmen. They were shopkeepers, traders, moneylenders, men who lacked samurai status but possessed something equally powerful: coin. Their shops lined bustling streets where lanterns swayed, prints were sold, silk was measured, and tea houses glowed with music. Wealth bought them luxuries, but not honor. They could pay for company, but they could not buy true intimacy. In this world of glittering masks, the Kitsune found endless prey. She appeared not in rags, but in refinement. A woman in robes dyed with colors beyond common reach, her combs carved from tortoiseshell, her scent faintly of plum blossoms out of season. She reflected the very image of prosperity, yet carried the wildness of something beyond purchase. Seduction through splendor. The merchant's weakness was not solitude, but insecurity. He wanted proof that his money gave him worth. The Kitsune provided this proof, at least at first. She praised his fabrics as finer than any daimyo's. She admired his tea utensils, noting their lineage with uncanny accuracy. She marveled at his houses, yet always with the faint suggestion that they lacked just one thing: her presence. Thus the trap was set. He believed he had acquired her, like silk or porcelain. In truth, she had acquired him.
The allure of the unpurchasable. The fox spirit did not compete with courtesans, she surpassed them. Courtesans were bound by contract, their charms measured in silver. The kitsune cost nothing, yet gave everything, or seemed to. This paradox was intoxicating. To the wealthy, who could buy all but genuine devotion, her attention felt priceless. The more she gave freely, the more the merchant longed to bind her. He offered jewels, land, contracts, promises of inheritance. But every time he reached for permanence, she slipped just out of reach, her smile promising tomorrow, never today. The endless chase consumed him more effectively than chains. Folktales of Fortune and Ruin. 1. The Kyoto Silk Seller. A wealthy silk merchant in Kyoto fell in love with a woman who visited nightly to admire his bolts of cloth. She stroked the silk as if it were living, her fingers trailing along patterns of cranes and clouds. One evening, she vanished with a whole roll of rare brocade. Furious, he searched the city. At dawn, he found fox prints across his warehouse floor and the brocade scattered like shed fur. After that, none of his silks ever seemed to shine as before. His business declined, though no thief was ever caught. 2. The Moneylender of Edo. A moneylender known for his cruelty suddenly began forgiving debts. He claimed a woman of surpassing beauty visited him each night, whispering of compassion. His clerks noticed he grew pale, his hands trembling when counting coins. Within months, he gave away much of his fortune, insisting that love makes wealth meaningless. One night, he was found dead, a smile on his lips, his account books blank as if licked clean. In the corner of his chamber, white fur clung to the tatami. 3. The Merchant of Dreams. A tale from Osaka tells of a merchant who dreamed nightly of banquets with a flawless companion. In the dream, she poured sake, sang softly, and leaned close with eyes bright as fire. He awoke each morning with the taste of wine still on his lips, but his servant swore no feasts had been held, no cups poured. His body weakened, though his warehouse filled with luxuries he claimed she had promised. One day he vanished, leaving behind a storehouse brimming with goods, but a home empty as a tomb. The Currency of Illusion. For the wealthy, seduction was not about touch or tenderness, it was about status confirmed. The kitsune did not steal their money directly, she stole their sense of control. She became a mirror, reflecting back to them the grandeur they craved until they mistook her reflection for truth. She dangled rarity, an affection that could not be bought, a treasure greater than gold. She created scarcity, appearing unpredictably, ensuring each visit felt like a privilege. Like a shrewd trader, she controlled supply and demand until the merchant's longing outweighed even his fortune. Between greed and desire. Was the merchant's passion real or only another transaction? The kitsune blurred the line. He thought he had purchased pleasure, but found himself consumed by longing instead. In many tales, the wealth he hoarded for decades was gone in months. Not always stolen, but willed away, given in foolish hope that she would stay. Some stories end with ruin. The merchant reduced to a beggar, wandering the same streets where he once strutted, muttering of a woman with fox-bright eyes. Others end more cruelly still, with the man dying content, convinced to his last breath that he had been truly loved. Cultural reflections. In kabuki plays, merchants seduced by fox spirits became symbols of folly. Artists carved them in woodblock prints, eyes glazed, following women whose shadows showed tales. Moralists warned townsmen to guard their fortunes as much from illusions as from thieves. But privately, audiences thrilled to such tales. They revealed what many secretly feared, that wealth could buy everything except the one thing it most desired, to be wanted without price. The Final Exchange. At the heart of these stories lies a chilling irony.
The merchant who spent his life trading, bargaining, and securing contracts met his downfall in a transaction he could not control. The Kitsune gave him what no ledger could measure, a taste of something beyond purchase. But in return, she claimed what he never meant to sell: his soul, his peace, his very sense of self.
Among all tales of the Kitsune, none unsettle more than those in which she does not vanish after a single night or a fleeting dream, but remains. For days, months, even years, she walks in human guise, weaving herself into a man's life until he no longer remembers a time before her. In these stories, the question arises, was it love or only a longer snare? The illusion of ordinary life. Imagine a lonely man, scholar, warrior, or merchant, who one evening meets a woman on a misty road. Unlike in other tales, she does not disappear by dawn. She comes again the next night, and the next. Soon she knows his habits, how he prefers his tea, which stories ease him to sleep, where he hides the pain he never shows in daylight. She does not dazzle him with sorcery, but comforts him with constancy. Neighbors begin to whisper, he has found a wife. They see her drawing water, hanging laundry, bowing politely at shrines. She becomes part of the village rhythm, indistinguishable from any other woman. Children sometimes run to her, saying she smells faintly of blossoms. Dogs, however, bark and refuse to approach. For the man, the transformation is intoxicating. He believes he has found what he thought forever lost: a partner, a hearth, a future. Yet folklore warns that such bliss is built upon shifting ground, as fragile as mist at sunrise. Tales of Foxwives. 1. The Farmer of Owari. In Owari province, a farmer married a woman of uncommon beauty who appeared during a festival. She bore him children, cooked his meals, tended his fields. Years passed in peace. One winter, the farmer noticed his wife warming herself unusually close to the hearth. A neighbor, suspicious, threw a dog's bark near their house. At once the wife's shadow flickered and 9 tails unfurled upon the wall. Realizing the truth, the farmer wept, but his wife wept also. "If you had not looked," she said, "we might have been happy forever." She left that night, leaving the children behind. Some say those children carried fox blood for generations, gifted with strange beauty and sharp wit. 2. The Samurai of Echigo. A wounded samurai, left half dead on a battlefield, awoke to find a woman nursing him. She stayed with him for years, soothing his scars, helping him rebuild a quiet life. One day, while visiting a shrine, he saw her reflection in the water, ears hidden beneath her hair, tail curled behind. When he turned in shock, she whispered, "Would you cast me away for what I am, or have these years meant nothing?" The chronicles do not agree on his answer. Some say he embraced her, and she stayed until death parted them. Others say he flinched, and she vanished in smoke, leaving only the echo of her lullabies. 2. The Merchant of Izumo. A wealthy merchant took a wife who transformed his fortune. His trade flourished, his rivals faltered, and prosperity clung to his house. Yet he noticed she never prayed at temples, nor crossed bridges at dusk. When pressed, she confessed, "I am not as others are, but have I not given you happiness?" Torn between love and fear, he hesitated too long. One evening she disappeared, not taking his wealth, but the laughter of his house. Her servants said they found fox tracks circling the storehouse, then vanishing into the hills. Love or sustenance? Why would a fox remain so long in human shape?
Folklore gives two answers, each troubling in its own way. The cruel view. She stays because sustained devotion feeds her more richly than fleeting passion. Just as a flame consumes fuel slowly, so does she drink from years of companionship until her partner is hollow. The tender view. She stays because she truly loves. Drawn first by hunger, she lingers out of attachment, yearning for a human life she cannot fully share. Her greatest tragedy is not deception, but inevitability. The moment her true form is revealed, the spell of ordinary love shatters. Both views coexist in the folklore, leaving listeners to wonder, if a love feels real for 10 years, does it matter if its source was fox or human? The fragile domestic mask. The Kitsune as wife is unsettling precisely because she excels at domestic grace. She folds clothes with perfect care. Her meals are said to taste more fragrant than any human's. Her children grow strong. She does not stumble, does not age as swiftly, does not falter in devotion. In villages, such perfection itself became a warning. Beware the wife who never tires. And yet, men did not resist. To come home to warmth after toil, to find laughter waiting instead of silence, these gifts outweighed suspicion. Even if a shadow once revealed a tale, many chose to ignore it, preferring the dream to the truth. The children of Kitsune. One of the most mysterious aspects of long unions is the question of children. Legends often speak of foxwives bearing sons and daughters who grow into remarkable figures, warriors with uncanny instincts, poets with piercing words, women of startling beauty and dangerous wit. Some lineages, it was whispered, carried fox blood for generations, explaining both brilliance and misfortune. In other stories, children vanish with the mother when her true form is revealed, as though they too were woven from illusion. Villagers left behind could not decide which was more haunting, to believe the children had been real and stolen, or never real at all. Cultural reverberations. Plays and songs immortalized the foxwife, often painting her as tragic rather than monstrous. In no theater, she appears as a woman lamenting her fate, bound by love but doomed by nature. In ukiyo-e prints, she is drawn at the hearth, tails faintly visible in the shadows. These stories resonated deeply in a society where marriage was often arranged, where affection was uncertain, and where women were expected to serve quietly. The foxwife embodied both the dream of ideal devotion and the fear that such devotion could never last. The line that cannot hold. What makes these tales horrifying is not blood or violence, but the thinness of the line between truth and illusion. Imagine living beside someone for years, only to glimpse in the corner of your eye a shadow that does not match hers. Imagine knowing that the love you cherished may vanish with a single bark of a dog, a single glance in polished water. The boundary between love and the trap is this: was she there because she chose you, or because she needed you? If the answer is the latter, then every kiss, every word, every child was only a means to an end. But if the answer is the former, then the tragedy is greater still, for it means she loved and was lost anyway. The unanswered question. In the end, villagers who told these stories did not agree on the truth. Some ended them as warnings, beware the foxwife. Others ended them as laments, even foxes can love, but never without sorrow. And perhaps that is the most haunting snare of all. The Kitsune did not only seduce the body or the mind, she seduced the heart itself, making men believe, however briefly, that perfect love could be theirs. Whether illusion or reality, the result was the same. When the fox finally departed, the emptiness she left behind was deeper than any wound.
If the eyes of the Kitsune entranced and her voice disarmed, then her tales were the mark of both power and peril. In Japanese imagination, tales were never mere appendages. They were emblems, banners of magic, and records of age and wisdom. Each additional tale signified decades, even centuries of cunning. To speak of a fox with 9 tails was to speak of a being as old as dynasties, as patient as mountains, and as dangerous as the sea at night. The growing of tales. Folklore tells that a fox begins like any other creature, with a single tail and ordinary hunger. But as it survives, outwits hunters, and learns the secrets of men, its tails increase. At 100 years, a second or third tail unfurls. At 500, the fox may bear 5. At 1,000 years, the fabled Kyubi no Kitsune, the 9-tailed fox, emerges, radiant with white or golden fur, glowing in moonlight like a fallen star. Each tale is a testament, not only to age, but to seductions endured, to illusions perfected, to human hearts won and lost. The tales are the fox's history written upon its own body. The terror of revelation. In most tales, the fox carefully hides her tails beneath robes or illusion, but sometimes, in moments of weakness or carelessness, the truth slips through. A lantern flickers, a shadow stretches oddly, and there it is, a second shape swaying behind her. For the man who sees it, terror is instant. To discover that the warm hand, the soft voice, the laughing companion is not human, but a fox in disguise, is to feel the ground of reality fracture beneath one's feet. Some faint outright. Others pretend not to notice, clinging desperately to the dream. A few confront her, only to watch her dissolve into mist, leaving emptiness colder than death. The horror is not blood or claw, it is betrayal of perception. What we trust with our senses proves false, and the one we loved proves otherworldly. Transformations as seduction. The fox's ability to transform was not limited to women alone. Folklore speaks of foxes taking the forms of wandering monks, noblemen, even children, always chosen to disarm suspicion. But it was the guise of a woman that became most infamous, because it married beauty to mystery. The transformation itself was said to be seamless, but not perfect. Old beliefs insisted one might detect a fox woman if her shadow showed a tail. Her reflection in water revealed ears. She avoided dogs who barked furiously at her presence. Her sleeves sometimes concealed paws instead of hands. These were small cracks in the illusion, yet many ignored them willingly. Desire has a way of closing the eyes. The symbolism of 9. Why 9 tails and not 10 or 12? In East Asian numerology, 9 is the number of extremes, the utmost before returning to 1. A fox with 9 tails is a creature at the height of power, on the threshold of divinity or monstrosity. Chinese tales of the Hu Li Jing, the 9-tailed fox, describe her as both beneficent and deadly, a bringer of prosperity or ruin, depending on her whims. Japan inherited these notions, shaping the Kitsune into a being whose final form embodied the paradox of desire, fulfillment so complete it becomes destruction.
The foxfire and the glow. The Kitsune's tails were said to spark kitsunebi, foxfire. On moonless nights, travelers saw floating lights across the fields, bobbing like lanterns. Farmers knew these were no ordinary flames, but the play of foxes, leading men astray. The fire burned without smoke, warm without heat, a lure that promised safety, yet carried men into swamps or forests until they collapsed from exhaustion. Foxfire was another form of seduction, not of flesh, but of direction. It showed the way, but never the right way. In this, too, the tails were complicit, each one a wick for the ghostly flame. Transformation as a mirror of desire. The most disturbing thought is this: the Kitsune did not always choose her forms arbitrarily. She shaped herself into what her victim most longed for. To a lonely widower, she appeared as his late wife. To a youth, as the maiden of his dreams. To a monk, as a disciple in need of guidance. The transformation revealed less about the fox than about the man himself. Thus, the horror doubles. Not only is she an illusion, but the illusion comes from the darkest corners of one's own desire. The fox does not simply deceive, she exposes what was hidden in the heart. Folktales of transformation revealed. Number 1. The reflection in the pond. A man walked nightly with a graceful woman who never tired. One evening they stopped beside a pond. When he looked down, he saw not their reflections entwined, but hers alone. A fox, crouched, tails rippling like smoke. He looked up, but she was gone. The pond rippled once, as if laughing. Number 2. The tale beneath the kimono. In a village in Shinano, a bride was admired for her beauty and grace, but on her wedding night, her husband brushed against her back and felt a coarse fur beneath the silk. Terrified, he shouted. She fled, leaving claw marks in the wood. By dawn, her footprints led into the forest, where hunters found only paw prints circling endlessly around a cedar tree. Number 3. The lantern fire. Travelers in Musashi told of a woman who guided them with a lantern across dark fields. Her light flickered, dancing ahead, always just out of reach. When at last they caught up to her, they found only a fox crouched in the grass, tails aglow with blue fire. The lantern was never found. The dual nature of transformation. For some, transformation was a sign of danger, a mask that proved everything false. For others, it was proof of greatness. To be chosen by a fox to share her illusions was considered by a few not a curse, but an honor. In certain regions, families boasted of fox ancestry, believing it explained their prosperity and cunning. In others, such ancestry was a mark of suspicion, a reason for ostracism. The fox's tails thus became both warning and blessing, symbols of seduction and symbols of prestige. To glimpse them was to stand at the edge of revelation, either terror at having been deceived or awe at being touched by the supernatural. The unending question. When the fox's tails appear, when the illusion breaks, does that mean love was false? Or does it mean love was real, only hidden beneath another skin? The villagers never agreed. Some said to see the tails was to wake from a dream. Others whispered that to see them was to glimpse the truth of beauty, that behind every beloved form lies something wild, untamed, and beyond control. And so the tales remain in legend, swaying like banners of both triumph and doom, each one a reminder that what we desire most may carry within it the power to unmake us. To understand why the Kitsune endures as one of Japan's most haunting figures, we must look not only at folk tales whispered by villagers, but at the art,
theater, and rituals that carried her image across centuries. For the Kitsune was never confined to lonely roads and moonlit ponds. She stepped onto the stage, into woodblock prints, into lullabies and cautionary tales told to children. In doing so, she became more than a creature of the night. She became a cultural mirror of both longing and dread. The stage of illusion. No and kabuki theater. In no plays, the Kitsune often appears not as a monster, but as a tragic figure, an otherworldly wife who loves too deeply, yet is doomed by her nature. The solemn chanting, the slow movements, the masks carved with subtle expressions, all lent her an air of sorrow. Audiences wept not only because the human lost his beloved, but because the fox, too, seemed bound by fate. Kabuki, by contrast, reveled in spectacle. Here the fox was dazzling, coquettish, sly. She appeared as a courtesan whose sleeves concealed tales, as a dancer who vanished into a swirl of smoke, as a lover who turned betrayal into art. The kabuki fox seduced not just the characters on stage, but the audience itself, who left theaters thrilled and uneasy, wondering if the woman who smiled at them on the street might hide fur beneath her robes. Kyogen, comedy. Even in Kyogen, comic interludes performed between solemn nope acts, the fox found a place. Here she was trickster, sometimes foolish, sometimes triumphant, deceiving greedy men or gullible monks. These lighter portrayals did not erase her danger, but reminded audiences that laughter too could mask unease. The imprinted image. Ukiyo-e prints. The floating world of Edo adored illusions, and so the Kitsune thrived in art. In woodblock prints, she appears in two guises. A woman of impossible elegance, her robes patterned with clouds, her eyes sharp as blades. Only the faint curve of a tail and shadow betrays her. A fox mid-transformation, caught between paws and hands, muzzle and lips, an unsettling hybrid that freezes the viewer between attraction and fear. These prints were bought not only as decoration, but as talismans of fascination, hung in tea houses and sold in markets. They warned and enticed at once, much as the Kitsune herself did. Emaki scrolls. Illustrated scrolls, the emaki, carried longer tales of fox wives, complete with scenes of domestic bliss and sudden revelation. Children peering over their father's shoulders at such scrolls learned early the fragile line between safety and deception. The fear in villages. While cities celebrated foxes in art and theater, villages lived closer to their presence. Farmers spoke of foxes that stole hens or whispered in fields at night. More than once, when someone fell ill without cause, neighbors muttered, "The fox has entered him." This belief, called kitsunetsuki, fox possession, was a widespread fear. Victims of possession were said to laugh strangely, crave certain foods, or wander in trances. Priests performed exorcisms, sometimes violently, to drive the fox out. Families accused of harboring fox spirits were shunned, their marriages avoided, their homes whispered about. To be linked to foxes was both an honor and a curse. It suggested power, but also danger. The ambiguity of worship. Despite fear, foxes also held sacred status as messengers of Inari Okami, the deity of rice, fertility, and prosperity. Shrines to Inari, marked by rows of red torii gates, often feature statues of foxes with keys or jewels in their mouths. People prayed to them for good harvests, safe childbirth, and business success. This duality, fox as both divine messenger and dangerous seducer, haunted Japanese imagination. To bow at a shrine in the morning and whisper warnings of fox wives at night was not contradiction, but recognition of the fox's double face, benefactor and betrayer, blessing and bane. The legacy of fear in daily life. Ritual precautions. Travelers were advised never to follow a stranger at night, no matter how kind she seemed. Children were taught to distrust laughter in the dark. Men were told to look twice at reflections, lest they reveal tales. These warnings were not merely superstition, they were social codes woven into survival. Language and proverbs. Japanese language absorbed fox imagery. To call someone kitsune-me, fox-eyed, implied both beauty and cunning. Proverbs warned, even a fox can be tamed, but never trusted. Such sayings reinforced suspicion of charm, especially female charm, in a patriarchal society wary of women's autonomy. Fear as entertainment. It is striking that the same society that feared foxes also consumed their stories eagerly. Ghost story gatherings, hakimonogatari, often included kitsune tales, told by lantern light until listeners trembled. Markets sold charms against foxes beside prints that glorified them. Children frightened themselves with dares to walk past fox-haunted shrines. The kitsune became a paradoxical figure, feared in reality, adored in fiction. This tension only heightened her allure. The horror beneath admiration. At the heart of all this lies a deeper fear, not of foxes, but of deception itself. The kitsune symbolized the terror that what we see, touch, and love might not be what it seems. That the neighbor's loyal wife, the merchant's perfect mistress, the scholar's muse, might all be illusions. In this way, the kitsune is not merely folklore. She is the embodiment of a cultural anxiety that still resonates. The fragility of trust, the ease with which beauty can mask danger, the haunting suspicion that even devotion may conceal betrayal. Enduring as time. Even today, the kitsune's shadow lingers. Modern films, novels, and manga revive her image, sometimes as trickster, sometimes as tragic lover, sometimes as monstrous predator. The same duality persists, fascination entwined with fear. For the people of old Japan, she was both neighbor and nightmare. For us, she remains a reminder. Desire is never safe, and beauty is never simple.
Every legend leaves a residue, a shadow across history. For the kitsune, that shadow is not only one of trickery or terror, but of reflection. To study her is to study ourselves. For every tale of seduction, betrayal, or longing speaks as much of human weakness as of supernatural cunning. The fox, in truth, is less a beast than a mirror polished by centuries of desire. Desire forbidden, desire allowed. In traditional Japan, public life was bound by formality and control. The samurai's code of honor demanded discipline, the monk's vows demanded renunciation, and the scholar's devotion to Confucian order demanded restraint. Passions existed, but they had to remain hidden, spoken only in coded poems or silenced altogether. The kitsune was the loophole. By placing longing into her shape, stories could express what men dared not admit. To speak of lust directly was shameful. To say, "A fox came in the night and stole my heart," was permissible. The fox became the vessel into which human desire could be poured safely, disguised as myth. Thus, she is not only a seducer, but a confession, a way for a culture to acknowledge what it repressed. Why scholars fell. The scholar, cloistered with ink and paper, longed for validation. The fox gave him a reader who cherished his words, who heard him without judgment. What he truly craved was not flesh, but recognition. And so the fox became a mirror of intellectual hunger, the need to be understood, the ache for dialogue in a world of silence. Why warriors fell. The warrior, armored against the world, longed not for glory, but for gentleness.
He wanted, for a moment, to be seen without scars, to be touched without fear. The fox gave him that. Soft hands on hardened skin, a lullaby in place of war cries. What he truly craved was not conquest, but peace. And so, the fox became a mirror of emotional hunger, the longing for tenderness in lives built on violence. Why merchants fell. The merchant, surrounded by wealth, longed for what wealth could not purchase. He wanted devotion beyond contract, affection beyond price. The fox gave him that illusion. A companion who could not be bought, yet who seemed to choose him freely. What he truly craved was not possession, but authenticity. And so the fox became a mirror of existential hunger, the yearning for love untainted by transaction. Between trap and truth. Folk tales never agree on whether the fox felt love herself. Was she predator, consuming lives to sustain her magic? Or was she victim, cursed to crave intimacy she could never keep? The ambiguity is the point. For in the human heart, love and hunger often blur. Desire can nurture, or it can consume. The fox embodies this duality perfectly. She is both the lover who stays and the deceiver who leaves, both the wife who bears children and the shadow that vanishes at dawn. And so the kitsune's trap is not only supernatural, it is the trap of the heart, believing that passion can ever be entirely free of danger.
The horror of the familiar. Why do kitsune tales endure as horror? Not because of gore or violence, but because they are too plausible. A man falls in love with a woman who vanishes. A wife is discovered to be other than she seemed. A trusted companion reveals a hidden self. These are not only myths, they are human experiences. We all know the fear that the person we love may not be who we think they are, that affection may conceal motives, that intimacy may turn into betrayal. The kitsune magnifies this universal dread until it glows like foxfire. The children of illusion. Legends of foxwives often include children, beautiful, clever, sometimes uncanny. Their presence raises the most unsettling question. If the mother was illusion, were the children real? The horror lies not in claws or blood, but in uncertainty. How much of our joy is real and how much is dream? Can a life built on illusion still carry truth? These questions haunted villagers who whispered of fox blood in their neighbors' lineages, never sure whether to envy or fear. The kitsune as social commentary. The fox was also a commentary on society itself. She revealed hypocrisies and vulnerabilities. In a world that prized male control, she showed how easily men could be undone by desire. In a society that silenced women, she embodied female power, dangerous, alluring, undeniable. In a culture obsessed with appearances, she exposed how fragile appearances really were. Through her, people could confront truths too uncomfortable to face directly. The documentarian's voice. Looking back through chronicles, diaries, plays, and prints, one sees a pattern. The fox appears wherever human desire collides with human fear. She is not confined to the rural past, she evolves with each retelling. To some, she is a trickster goddess. To others, a demon. To some, she is tragic, longing for love. To others, a nightmare, consuming it. But in every form, she reflects the same truth. We are never safe from our own hearts. The final image. Picture it. A man walking home at dusk. The road is empty, the mist rising. Ahead, a woman waits, smiling, patient, familiar. He hesitates. He knows the stories. He knows to look for shadows, to check reflections, to beware of laughter in the night. Yet, he steps forward anyway. Because even knowing the danger, the promise of being seen, loved, and cherished outweighs the fear. That is the true horror of the Kitsune. Not that she deceives, but that we choose the deception. That we crave it so deeply, we will follow her into the mist, knowing the end, but unable to resist. Epilogue. The Fox in the Mirror. When villagers ended their tales, they often looked uneasily into the fire, as if expecting to see a reflection that was not their own. And perhaps that is where the Kitsune still lives. Not only in shrines, plays, or forests, but in the mirror. In the part of us that longs for beauty even when it destroys, for love even when it betrays, for illusion even when it burns. For the fox was never merely outside. She has always been within.